oh, by the way, you see this object then go into the water, and you see it actually moving underneath the water, like now it's white, and you see like it's like what's going on there, and then it pops up out, it's black again, and and then it pops up and it splits into two objects, and now you got two objects that look the same, kind of like the same, but they're not the exact same thermal temperature and the same thermal signature. And then the one kind of hangs back a little bit, and then the other and drops into the water, I guess, or thing. And the next thing you know is the other one kind of hangs up there a little bit, and then it goes in the water and it's gone.
Welcome, Rich. Thanks for coming on the Rob Freeman UFO World Explorer channel with us for an interview. It's great to have you here.
Looking forward to being here again and seeing you. I've missed you. It's been a while.
We missed you. It was great, with you spending time with you in Cloverdale, Alabama. We'll get to that later. And of course, at the conference you had was fantastic. But I wonder if you could start by giving a very brief introduction of yourself. A lot of people know your story, but some newer viewers don't. So maybe just give a really brief background on how you got involved. And then we're going to talk about, what you're doing today, your recent appearance on the History Channel and, when we were together at Cloverdale, things like that.
Sure, no problem. I'll be as brief as I can. Age 13, 1964. I had to do a presentation for the science class on UFOs, and I didn't even know what this thing was. I signed up, and it was the only thing that nobody put their name next to on the list. I had to do a 10-minute presentation. I bombed the presentation because I didn't really study it, and I wasn't really all that interested in it. So my science teacher, who I did it in front of the class, knew a lot about it, and killed me with the question and answer period, where he said, well, what about jet pursuits? I said, well, what book did you read? I think I read the Encyclopedia Britannica version, and that's about it. I went home that evening and I was watching on the news, and they were talking about the April 24th, 1964 Socorro case in Socorro, New Mexico, with a police officer that had seen one, and it landed and two beings next to it. And that got me kind of interested, because when I heard that, I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. It actually had physical evidence with it. And then a couple days later, my aunt took me to a bookstore where I actually got a legitimate book on the subject called The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects by the former head of Project Blue Book. It was Captain Edward Ruppelt. Anyway, that got me hooked. At age 15, I was already going around the city of Dayton, Ohio, which is where Project Blue Book was, by the way. And it was just up the road for me, and that really got me going. Anyway, the bottom line was I just got known around the city of Dayton, Ohio as the UFO guy to call. And I started now going out and doing investigations at a very young age. I wasn't with any particular organization at the time. But I found out that there was this Midwest UFO network that was right around the 1969 time period. And I basically went and signed up. And so now I started with MUFON when they were not the Mutual UFO Network, they were with the Midwest UFO Network. And so I got started with them, and I became the state section director for Dayton, Ohio after a short bit, and started doing case investigations hundreds of, during the 1973 peak UFO wave that was going on. I was running around the city of Dayton like a chicken with my head cut off, looking at everything, getting calls, and it just went on from there. I probably have done over the past, now it's going to be, in April, it'll be 57 years that I've been doing this, which is a phenomenally long time. But anyway, so that's kind of like how I got started into the UFO thing.
You founded an organization called the SCU. Give the viewers just a brief rundown on that, because Marcus and I were super impressed with that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And so right around 2015, we got a case on the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico event, the video, and it was passed to us. We were all part of, there were all the group that started SCU were all MUFON members, but we were given this video with a caveat by the actual witness to say that they didn't want to take it through a UFO channel, but they wanted it treated scientifically. And so we all had to sign a non-disclosure agreements saying that we wouldn't even mention it to MUFON or anybody, and we would just study the case and publish our report, which we did. And then, so we spent about 1.5 to almost 2 years meeting to discuss every aspect of that. It's a 3-minute and 54-second video, and we broke it into 7,027 frames and looked at every frame and almost every pixel on that screen. So we were able to do that. We had a physicist, we had a mathematician, we had a whole variety of very talented people. And we decided that we were going to create a scientific organization. And so by about the 2016 to 2017 time period, we were having conversations with each other about starting it and making it a legitimate organization, and all going to be science-based. It's going to include all the scientists. It's going to include, you know, key researchers and business people, and then we're going to make it like a think tank. So that's what we did, and we formed the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies in 2017, and now we're in probably about 110 members of the organization, with about maybe like 25 or higher or PhDs.
Fantastic. Well, Rich, I'm most impressed that it's a group of scientists. I remember when we met in Cloverdale, you actually gave me the Coles Notes version of things that I should be doing as a scientist. I'm not a scientist, but you told me, Rob, if you're going to go down this path, down this rabbit hole, here's a number of things you should be doing. And I really appreciated that, because it, you know, it was from a science perspective, very rigorous. And, you know, we were already debunking sightings and things that we were having prior to that. But after that visit with you, it took us to a new level. So we really appreciate that. Some of the tips you gave from a science point of view. Now, you know, you did that whole report on that event that you were just talking about. Can you give us just a very brief conclusion?
So ultimately what you had with this, in this video clip, was an object that appeared, let me put it this way. Appearance is one thing, and what it actually did is maybe a little bit different, but ultimately it's 9 o'clock at night. It's on April 25th of 2013. And you have basically a Customs and Border Protection aircraft, and it's a -8 aircraft, turboprop, and it's taking off from the Rafael Hernandez Airport in Puerto Rico. And that's, if you look at it on a map, you'll see Puerto Rico. It's in the top northwest corner of that island, if you would. Anyway, they're taking off on a routine mission that they're going to be on, where they're going to do checking into drug smuggling kinds of things, and that's what the border protection people do anyway. But so they fly off, and as they're heading off of the runway, they happen to look over, and they see to their north some sort of a lighted object that's actually coming in from the water, and they were quite concerned about that, because it looked like it was like maybe potentially heading toward the airport. So they're radioing the control tower. I said, I thought you said that I was cleared for takeoff, and yet I'm now seeing an object that is over where I'm going to be heading, and you're not telling me about it, you know? And so anyway, so they're now heading over there, and the control tower said, well, we see the light too, but we don't have it on radar. And so, well, that's kind of interesting. Just prior to that, by the way, there was an object that was being seen just in that same vicinity, a little bit further offshore. And we caught it on radar when we were able to get radar data. It showed about 50 blips of this object doing some incredible maneuvers out in the water. And so then right after that, you don't see that anymore. The next thing you see is this object now going toward the land, right? So it worked out perfectly that the timing was that this was that object. Well, anyway, the bottom line is that they go around once. They fly in a big circle around this object and kind of keeping an eye on it to see what it's going to do. And then by the time that they get almost a full revolution from where they took off from the airport, they now notice that the actual object has dropped its light and it's gone dark. And they're thinking, okay, this is a drug smuggling. They're going to drop something. But the big concern is, again, they're heading towards an airport. The runway is being held. There was a flight that was supposed to take off, a FedEx plane. They stopped it from taking off and waited. The object is continuing to come in. You see it look like it's like circles or like around the airport and goes over towards the runway and then makes an approach that goes like it's taking it back out to the same water. And you see the water line coming up. But the interesting thing about the video at that point is that you see it now is going through trees. It's going behind a telephone pole. It's, you see cars out there. And again, this is all a thermal image. And thermal, you have to understand when you're looking at this thing, they have it, the settings on the camera are set to where black is hot and white is cold. So it's thermal contrast that you're picking up. But the dark part of that matched the temperature of cows that we saw in a cow field, and we were able to match the temperature to about 104 degrees, which that's in and of itself kind of interesting. That it was a little bit right around that same temperature as the cows. And oh, by the way, you see this object then go into the water, and you see it actually moving underneath the water. Like now it's white, and you see it's like what's going on there, and then it pops up out. It's black again, and and then it pops up and it splits into two objects, and now you got two objects that look the same, kind of like the same, but they're not the exact same thermal temperature and the same thermal signature. And then the one kind of hangs back a little bit, and then the other and drops into the water, I guess, or something. And the next thing you know is the other one kind of hangs up there a little bit, and then it goes in the water and it's gone. Well, okay. So when you look at that, you say, well, what do you know that splits into two? I mean, I can't begin to think of anything that does that, And then the whole did it really go in the water? And then we're looking for the splash. We found a splash. We found it going behind a telephone pole. So we had an understanding of how far away it was and its path. We could then start to look at measuring speed, and we did the speed measurements and stuff like that. We had to take out the fact that the plane was kind of circling it. So you got to deal with the parallax issue. And so you kind of like now back off and say, well, what can you determine on speed that way? It hit the water at about 109 miles an hour. What do you know that hits 109 miles an hour and is still in one piece, right? And then you see the splash, then you see the splitting. It's like, okay. So you run it through your mind and you say, well, okay, what is this? We came up with the idea, well, could it be a balloon? Okay, so we looked into balloons and we tried to figure out, is that what it, and then we actually had somebody with a thermal camera, go out and take a picture of what a balloon looks like. And there's no match at all, no match whatsoever. And then and then plus that doesn't split into two, so then you're, okay, well then what, and it can't go in the water? Balloons don't go in the water? That doesn't make any sense. Then we looked at birds. Well, could this be a bird of some sort? And we did the same thing. We thermal camera, put it on birds to see what that would look like. Doesn't look anything like that. That's not gonna work. We tried drones. We looked at drones. Maybe it was a drone. And so, but then you don't see, again, what drone hits the water at 109 miles an hour, goes underneath the water, comes back up out of the water, and then splits into two. Well, when you look at the Navy inventory, you can't come up with anything like that. We found that they have a thing called the flimmer. And what it basically is think about a torpedo with wings. They drop the wings and the torpedo goes under the water, but it doesn't come back out, right? So you can't find anything that legitimately matches all of those kind of elements. It had to have a light on it, be able to see it, and then the light goes out. And then it's got to have that temperature. Balloons don't have a temperature of 104, and helium-filled balloons do not do that in that kind of temperature. Plus, there's about 15 to 18 mile an hour winds from the northeast that are coming along, and that didn't match because at one point it was moving counter to the wind, and so, well, wait a minute, does that make any sense? So there you go. I gave you a very quick wrap-up summary of the whole case, and we just don't know what it is.